Well, shalom, shalom. I'm Barbara, and I'm always short and sweet. Cherokee Indians are one of the lost tribes of Israel. And today we're going to be going over a newspaper article from Cleveland, Tennessee Public Library and Chattanooga Public Library in the 1920s. There was a lost tribe of Israel, evidence of the inhabited section of Bradley County more than 4,000 years ago. And so the story is that on the Hooper farm, Mr. Hooper wanted to expand his farm, and he was going up on the ridge where he knew there were some rocks, and he had like an 80-acre piece of land there, and this one rock that he found was covered in all this writing. When he dug it up, he found that it was writing he couldn't read at all, so he figured it was Indian writing. And he dug it up, and he found there was a foundation underneath it. So then he started looking and digging around that ridge, and he found that there was a 700-foot wall, 700 foot long, and it was about 3 feet wide because there were 3 ply stones that were 10 inches thick, and then all these characters of Hebrew writing or some Indian writing was scratched along all those stones on the western side of it. So it was a big issue in the area. People came out to see it and everything, but a few years later, everyone kind of forgot about it. Well, one day, Mr. Hooper was in the restaurant, sitting at a table, telling a story to one of his friends. And a scientist, Albert Rawson, was sitting there in the area, and he overheard them, and he said, "Can I go up and look at that? I'm interested in prehistoric writings and evidence." And so Mr. Hooper's cousin drove him up there that day in a carriage, and they went up to the farm, and he looked it over, and he saw one of those big flat iron stones about every 25 or 35 feet. And then there were big trees 3 foot wide that were 50 feet apart, all along the 700-foot wall that was 3 foot high and about 3 foot wide. And so he dug it out. He got his team in there, a bunch of scientists and archaeologists, and they found on each one of those slabs that were 10 inches wide, on the western side of the slab, there was this tiny little gravel, and then there was this clay, a special clay that was not found in that area. And these letters were 2 to 3 inches high, inscribed on that clay. And they were Hebrew. They were Paleo Hebrew. And so he also discovered the Book of Deuteronomy written on those 3 walls. And this is what the ridge may have looked like, and there's a pencil drawing of it here and some of the writings. Rawson of New York was confident the hieroglyphics were the work of the ancient Hebrews. And each character, like I said, was 3 to 5 inches tall, and they cited the Book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 27, 1 to 5. Okay, verse 4. "Therefore it shall be when you've gone over the Jordan, that ye shall set up these stones which I commanded you this day in Mount Ebal, and thou shalt plaster them with plaster. And there shalt thou build an altar unto Yahweh thy Elohim, an altar of stones. Thou shalt not lift up an iron tool on them." So they were never to use iron tools because it would be like making an idol. So it says here in verse 2, "And they passed over to write all the words of the law on the stone." And upon the uncovered surface of the discovered wall is the imprint of the sole of a foot, 13 inches long. And hieroglyphics are on the ball of the foot also. And this imprint is symbolic of the faith the Israelites had in the promise of Moses that was in Deuteronomy 11:22-24. Every place whereon the soles of your feet shall tread shall be yours. From the wilderness and Lebanon, from the river Euphrates, even unto the uttermost sea shall your coast be. And there were a lot of newspaper articles back then from the Chattanooga Times and other newspapers. So are the Cherokees Hebrew? And were they one of the lost tribes? Well, besides all the Indian writings and it being in Paleo Hebrew, there is more evidence of that. This is from an article of Mr. Yates. If one American geneticist is correct, the list of groups known to make up the 12 tribes of Israel may need urgent updating. According to Donald Yates, there is compelling evidence that within the Cherokee Nation of American Indians, mothers and other maternal forebears bear bona fide Middle East Jewish genetic markers. The essence of my findings is that the Cherokee have had families of Jewish heritage in their midst since before Columbus, and that early Jewish traders married Cherokee women to cement their ties with the tribe, Mr. Yates says. Mr. Yates studied the DNA of 67 Cherokee test subjects and distributed them into the haplogroups, genetic populations with a common ancestor. So Mr. Yates found that almost 1/4 of the 67 were haplogroup T, a group not usually found among the Native Americans and which is more common to the Middle East, specifically Iran and Iraq. Many people have expressed the fact that the Cherokees resemble the Jewish population. Indeed, my own visits into the Cherokee, North Carolina, seems to confirm this. Unfortunately, the sampling of the DNA appears to be incomplete. Cherokees have high levels of test markers associated with the Berbers, native Egyptians, Turks, Lebanese, Hebrews, and Mesopotamians. Genetically, they are more Jewish than the typical American Jew of European ancestry. So remember the 12 tribes of Israel, they're mentioned all the way through the Old Testament, and they are mentioned in the New Testament in the book of Revelation, Revelation 7:1-8, and they're listed with the 144,000 of the 12 tribes of Israel. So they will be in end times. Jeremiah 31:10 says, "Hear the word of the Lord, O nations. Proclaim it in distant coastlands. He who scattered Israel will gather them and will watch over his flock like a shepherd." So he says in Ezekiel 28:24-25, "When I gather the house of Israel, they will live in their land, which I gave to my servant Jacob." So look for all these links below and like if this is a blessing to you, and share it with your friends that love Yeshua and that love Israel and that are searching for the lost 10 tribes. And he is gathering Israel. I know he is. Maybe you're that seed. We don't know for sure, all our DNA. But remember, I'm short and sweet, and I'll see you next time, Yah willing. Thank you for being here today.